Time now to take a look through the international newspapers with our press reviewer, Elena Casas. Hello, Elena. Now, we're going to start off with Syria. There are some UN monitors there this week. They arrived just a few days ago. The papers, though, questioning just how much of a difference they can really make to the situation on the ground.
Yes, exactly. The Times is saying even if they send 300, which is what the UN now says that it wants, they still can't make very much of a difference. It's a tiny drop in the ocean of what's going on in Syria. And they say it's just part of endless rounds of international diplomacy that have only served to buy Assad extra time to continue repressing the uprisings going on there. They say it's a correspondent writing who's been in Syria on the ground talking to insurgents, and they're completely fed up with the lack of action from the West. They say we haven't got anything from them, no communications equipment, no medical equipment, certainly no weapons, and they're just leaving us to die here with these endless rounds of diplomacy. The paper, The Times, says that really things like humanitarian corridors and buffer zones mean troops on the ground, and troops on the ground are what is needed. Blue-helmeted observers are just not enough. Now, in the editorial of that paper, interestingly, they're looking at a new campaign that started up yesterday on YouTube to try and change things in Syria in a slightly out of the ordinary sense. It's been made by the wives of two former ambassadors who lived in Syria and who personally know Asma al-Assad, of course, Bashar al-Assad's wife. It's an appeal that they've made personally directed at her. It's footage of her shopping and looking rather glamorous, spliced with images of dead children in Syria. And they're, of course, calling on her to try and get her husband to do something about it. Now, unlikely that video will make a great deal of difference, but it does pose the question of just how important has social networking been in Syria. We talked a lot during last year's Arab Spring uprisings about the role of social networking. Foreign Policy asks today, what role has it played in Syria? And they reckon actually that it's been quite significant. YouTube videos of simple things like a woman in the street holding up a placard saying "Stop the killing" that have circulated and got thousands of clicks in Syria on the internet serve a really important purpose, they reckon, in making activists and small and often disparate and divided opposition groups remember that they belong to a big movement all over Syria that's joining together to try and get rid of Assad. It creates a sense of community. It's very important, they say, and stops people becoming demoralised. It helps them keep motivation. The Stop the Assad Regime in Syria Facebook page, which has 500,000 likes on it, 500,000 fans, they reckon that's also been important in coordinating and collating the campaign that's going on across Syria against Assad. So it might seem silly that a revolution could be organised via Facebook, they say, but it has actually played an important role.
Back now to traditional media. The LA Times published two photos of US soldiers in Afghanistan posing with corpses, and that's caused a huge controversy. The US is trying to limit the fallout from the latest scandal involving US troops in Afghanistan. And there's a row over whether the paper should have published these photos at all. Of course, Leon Panetta, the Defence Secretary, asked them not to.
Absolutely, and the Pentagon has criticised the LA Times indeed for having published them. But the Washington Post says in a piece today, the fact that the Pentagon still thinks it can complain about this shows they just haven't quite realised the transparency and accountability that's necessary if you're going to spend $500 billion of taxpayers' money over the course of a decade on a war in Afghanistan. Those taxpayers have got to know what exactly is happening to their money, what's really going on in Afghanistan. The LA Times, in their own defence, say pretty much the same thing. Their editor writes in that paper that they knew those images were trustworthy, they knew that they had come from a verifiable source, and that they felt a responsibility to publish them, although they did pull a number on grounds of taste because they were just too gruesome. The Guardian says today that the way that the US has dealt with the release of these images shows a cultural problem in the US Army. They say effectively they've got two strategies when these kind of things happen. Of course, it hasn't been the only one. There's been the kill team, the photos of soldiers urinating on corpses, things like that. The Pentagon either says these are isolated individuals, it's a breakdown of discipline, they're just on their own, or it says we mustn't publish these because we could stir up insurgent action against US soldiers. They say either strategy shows they haven't understood what's really going on here. They're not isolated incidents because we've had quite a number, haven't we, of bad behaviour by US soldiers over recent years, so they reckon it shows there's a cultural problem in the army, and the fact that they don't want the images to be published and Afghans to know about them shows that some in the US administration still don't really take seriously that Afghans should be the deciders of their own destiny. They've got the right to have all the information possible. We can't just say we know best.
Heading to Bahrain now, the Grand Prix is scheduled to take place there on Sunday, but some papers are questioning whether it should go ahead considering the unrest that there's been there.
Yes, Bahrain's been the Arab Spring country we've rather forgotten recently, but there was actually a big demonstration there on Wednesday, reports The Independent, where 200 people marched against the Formula One going ahead. They say it's being used by the regime as a kind of international PR stunt, try and make it look better. If our country's safe for a major international sports event, then there can't really be repression going on there. But The Independent and The Guardian too say that is still going on. There's a day of rage planned in Bahrain for Sunday when the Grand Prix is on to try and protest against it.
OK, thanks very much, Elena, for that wrap of the international press.